Mm,
Cool.
that's a good sign.
Yeah, there's a little dot now. There wasn't before.
Find them.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's right. Yeah, the last meeting, I was doing it on mine and it didn't work, but we're recording on Georgie's laptop now, so that should all be fine, and hopefully we can get this posted up so that anyone who's missed it can watch it back. But yeah, hi, welcome to the second official bi-weekly air event. It's a bit of a mouthful, but thank you so much for everyone coming. It's amazing to see like so many people turn up again, and yeah, it's just really nice to see like that people are committed to coming. So yeah, I won't sort of introduce too much, because hopefully our guest speakers can introduce themselves. But yeah, our first kind of guest speaker, which we're really excited about, well, it's Eugene and Amira from Don't Settle, which is part of Beat Freak. So they're a Birmingham-based kind of organisation and project, and I'm just going to pass straight over to them.
Hello, hi everyone. As Ella introduced, we are from Don't Settle, which is a project of Beat Freaks in particular. And yeah, firstly, my name's Eugene Hilton. I was born and raised in Botswana, which is a Southern African country. And I am community developer at the Don't Settle project. Amira, would you like to introduce yourself before I sort of go on about what Don't Settle does?
Yeah, I mean, you got my name. So I'm Amira. I've been involved with Don't Settle for about a year. I don't work with Beat Freaks, but I've been involved in their curator projects, their Lunar residents, all sorts of stuff. So I'll hand over to Eugene.
Cool. Just to sort of elaborate a bit on what we do at Don't Settle, we basically believe history is a collection of stories, and we want to make all those stories visible. How? By changing who tells these stories. So, I mean, to put it simply, Don't Settle empowers young people of color to sort of change the voice of heritage through the arts, research, and governance, to put it quite lightly. For more, we have various like strands within that. So we have a curator program, we have a Lunar Campfires program as well, which Amira mentioned she was a part of, and I used to be a part of before I got the job as community developer. We also have a research program as well. Our whole like mandate on top of all that is sort of to give autonomy to young people and give them the space to sort of design or co-design these spaces. Again, it's about who's telling those stories and, you know, changing that narrative. And yeah, today, obviously, we're here to talk about institutional racism. For us in particular, we're going to talk about institutional racism in the heritage sector. I'm sort of going to begin by, well, just briefly speaking about institutional racism in general. But, you know, most people know what racism is, the definition at least, but what some, or rather many people still fail to recognize is the fact that racism can manifest itself in various shapes and forms. And I'm here to speak about one such form, which is institutional racism, or systemic racism, known to some, which is probably one of the toughest forms of racism to tackle because it's so embedded in every facet of society today. It is quite literally the legacy of slavery and colonialism, and is the foundation for a vast array of other forms of racism by POC people experience to this day. It is racial discrimination that has really become established as normal behavior within like a society. Various sectors like politics, education, healthcare, employment, that it's embedded in, just to name a few. But before I sort of go on the specifics with the heritage sector, because we're approaching this from more discussion-based presentation, which is what we actually normally do. We believe in having a discussion space, because as much as we might be able to inform other people. We really love to learn from what other people think and their opinions. But I wanted to ask briefly, why might you think this is such a hard concept for some people to grasp, institutional racism? So, yeah.
If anyone wants to answer that, either just unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. Either way.
I just start off. I
Yeah.
say it's not something that you can necessarily see. It's not something that's like tangible. It's not there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We know better.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think a lot of people obviously benefit from institutional racism as well. So as a huge section of society that obviously wouldn't necessarily want that to be exposed and changed.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I agree with what you both said, in particular, Georgia, what you're saying about how the fact that you can't see or touch it, even like see, like people, those kind of people would sort of struggle to notice it in some, unless you know of the definition. It's really hard because it's part of your day-to-day life. You experience it every day, even if you don't know what it means. You are experiencing it if you are BIPOC. What usually helps me understand these systems, though, is by putting it into a bit of a perspective. So with this perspective, specifically within the heritage sector, which is a bit of a made-up case study I have here, but I'm sure it's the reality to many. So you can imagine you're a young Black person who has an interest in history, specifically their personal history. And that person decides to visit a local museum to inform themselves of their past. They start to explore the museum, looking for something that speaks back to who they are and where they come from. But the only thing they find in it is an exhibit on the slave trade and the various colonial figures that influenced the slave trade. Whilst this is quite obviously a very relevant aspect of history that is important to know, the young Black person wanted to know more on the positive impacts Black people have made throughout history, but can't find any. All that person sees is white faces depicted in old paintings and sculptures. And to top it all off, this young person then finds an exhibit commemorating a white historical figure for his accomplishments, yet this figure has also been known to own a plantation. On that, I want to just ask another question based on that case study. And this is more personal. This is a very sort of personal question. I don't know how many of you have sort of been to museums or heritage sites yourself, but if you were in this young person's shoes, like, how do you think they feel? Or how would you feel? Yeah, how would you feel about this if you were in their shoes? Like, don't all rush at once.
Lost? Do you feel lost?
I think for a lot of Black people, they too are under the misconception that our history begins with slavery. It's only, you have to go out of your way to find the research. I mean, they still, in media, try to encourage the idea that Egyptians look like Europeans, and and they try to create myth around all the different temples in Ethiopia and who built them, because it doesn't fit their agenda to embrace the idea that civilization started in Africa.
Just to add to that as well, it makes people of color, when they go to these museums, feel inferior in a way, because you think that there's nothing great about your history or anything as impressive as our own history, obviously, until you do your own research. And that can still stick with us today in modern times, where people still feel inferior. So that's also quite an ongoing psychological impact.
Yeah, and I think you'll also feel, like you said, unimportant, like not that worthy, because you don't see anyone that looks like you to relate to.
Yeah.
Made a big.
I would also say, like, just having a lack of belonging. Like if you don't know your roots, or you can't find them, like you don't know where you belong, or you feel like you don't know where you belong.
Yeah, and I think because we only see depictions of slavery, we're always in sorrow. You know, our emotion is it's based around sorrow and anger and negative emotions, as opposed to, you know, before slavery, you know, where there was a lot of celebration in our culture.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
discusses the hardship. Excuse me.
No, sorry about that. Carry on.
Oh no, I was just saying it only describes the hardship of a nation and of a people, as opposed to all of the achievements and the kind of the celebrations that just get completely whitewashed.
No, exactly. No, exactly that reason. I mean, it's almost like they want you to not be proud, if that makes sense, because all you're seeing is the hardships, and whilst still important, and it goes back to that thing of a sense of sort of belonging. From my experiences, you know, grown up in Southern Africa and having visited a lot of museums there, I felt more of a sense of pride. But when I arrived in Birmingham last year and I went to the big museum, it was a very different kind of feeling, if that makes sense. It really felt like the glorification of colonialism, if that makes sense. But yeah, no, those are like great answers. As I said, it really is a personal thing. But just to carry on, at Don't Settle, we really love asking people what they think heritage means. And there isn't necessarily a wrong answer, because it really does depend on the individual. But when we speak of the heritage sector, we usually refer to museums or / galleries or historical sites that give us a glimpse into our past. So institutional racism really doesn't shy away from influencing this sector as well, through such things such as like the lack of a diverse workforce behind the scenes, or sort of the higher ups governing the actual site or museum / gallery. This therefore informs the audience that ends up coming to museums. But my colleague Mira will elaborate when she gets the chance to speak on that a little bit more. Now, as I said, personally speaking, I think when I was coming up with that sort of fictional case study, I mean, obviously it's true, but I was sort of thinking about, so personally speaking, I'm someone that does enjoy learning about history and the various cultures that have contributed to our planet's history and how it informs and influences the world today. Yet, as I said, I remember about when I arrived in Birmingham and visited the museum, I was naturally excited to see the various exhibits from around the world, but a lot of what I saw didn't feel like the museum was representing or celebrating another culture, especially because I knew myself that some of the various artifacts, for example, from Africa, were looted, and these felt more like tributes to colonialism as opposed to celebrating or representing a culture well. As I said, it was a reminder and almost a glorification of the fact that England tried to take over the world. And museums continue to distort and mask the oppression of the cultures they supposedly represent. And their ideological messages appear as truth, because museums often do not or cannot reveal to the public the actual choices and negotiation through which cultures are misrepresented. In particular, objects or displays. I think we've all seen, and this is sort of why the BLM movement has influenced this resurgence of the toppling or removal of statues celebrating certain historical figures. It's a very relevant topic today. It always has been, to be honest, but in particular today, because these statues are constantly reminding people that their ancestors were enslaved and oppressed. And you can imagine, like, even the physical presence of these statues, most of them are towering over people as if looking down on them. Monuments are statements of power and presence in the public. They are often like designed to appear permanent, but they require a vast amount of funds and resources to keep them in mint condition, and mindsets as well to sort of keep them up and hold them up. These statues basically help solidify the ideals that these people live by. And personally, to me, that feels very insulting. And this is sort of my last question before I pass it on to Amira. I wanted to ask what your opinions were on why you think removing these statues is so important, and how would you think it contributes to decolonizing the heritage sector?
I mean, I will just jump in there and straight away and say, I think the statue removal was just was a small issue in a wider sea of issues. When you go inside museums, you see all these artifacts, and people are celebrating them, they're paying money to get in, or they might be getting in free, however they get into the building, okay? When people are actually sort of feeling more empowered from the original countries they come from, and they approach museums and ask actually to get their artifacts back, and they're actually being refused, you know, and they're being told, no, they're not going to be returned to your country because they belong to us, but we're happy to help you, you know, to keep them in mint condition. That's not appropriate. You know, so the fact that, you know, taking out a bit of a statue or making a bit of a deal about, you know, celebrating that a statue's been taken down is so small in the grand scheme of things, because really what you're looking at is an absolute outright refusal to admit wrong, and that is really damaging.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not so much about the physicality, the actual action of taking the statue down, but it's more about what that action symbolizes. It's a form of protest that really represents decolonizing a society's mindset. It's social justice at its finest. And it is with the hope that, as you said, it is a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but I think it's still very much an essential step. And that would then hopefully get into the whole thing of returning a lot of these artifacts to their communities, wherever they may be, which is quite literally an even bigger problem. Does anyone have anything else to say on that question I just sort of asked?
I just think it's really important that, obviously we've seen some statues being removed, and they say that they're going to put them into museums, you know, so that people can see them in there. But I think it's really important that and that's why this group's so key actually, that we lobby for, as you said, the return of artifacts back to their original homes. And that we have to really, we can't lose sight of that, and just accept that, okay, statues are coming down and they're not towering over certain places in certain cities, but they have to come down, and what's in the museum, the riches in the museum, they have to go back, you know, they have to go back, they have to be returned. So I think, I would like to hope that is, you know, that's what we're thinking about, and those are the next steps that potentially we could lobby for.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I quickly just wanted to like tell a quick story about my dad, who, so just on the point of how important things like this are. I think off the back of, I think the symbolism of taking down the Colston statue has triggered, like, yeah, it has had quite a big effect on, like, for example, in Brighton, that my dad has been trying to get the church to remove a gravestone for quite a long time that has the, sorry to use this word, but coon written on it. It's just obviously very, very offensive. And for quite a few months, they've just been doing nothing. And now they have finally removed it. And I mean, they haven't said that it's definitely because of the whole, you know, the whole current, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, but I do think that it is most likely because, you know, there's likely to be more, you know, more conversation about it, and I think like the Brighton Council has now like asked for people to come forward and report any street names or monuments that they find offensive. So like that's why, you know, these things can trigger a lot more action from like different places in the country. So that's quite a positive thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Those are all really good points. I think I've been on this topic for a bit now, and time has gone a bit over. I know we're supposed to end at 8:20, but I think I can leave my colleague Amira to speak a bit about what goes on behind the scenes in the heritage sector. So
it's a good thing like I speak really fast. So I just want to make a note, you know, if you've got any points, please raise them. I'd love learning from other people. If you've got any questions, please ask them. So like Eugene was saying, Don't Settle really does deal with the heritage sector a lot, and this sector in itself is the literal physical embodiment of a nation's history and the story that they want to tell. And like Eugene was saying, that includes museums, historical sites, education, archaeology, archives, all sorts of things. And the reason I'm giving you this long rambling list is because it takes up so much space in our public discourse, and it often informs the dominant narratives of historical culture. So it's 100% something that we have to be challenging over and over again. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to look at with you guys is the way the workforce is actually set up, especially within the sector. It's predominantly white. So that's another thing that really has to be tackled when we talk about institutionalized racism here. So we can't have meaningful, honest narratives in telling stories about people's pasts without actually looking at the people who make up the behind the scenes. So I'm talking about senior leadership, I'm talking about curators, I'm talking about people who work in marketing, all of these spaces. We have to interrogate them in order to make sure that it's more representational. And as someone like, I just finished my history degree in Birmingham, which is a very diverse city. I did it at the University of Birmingham, not a very diverse university. So walking into a lecture hall with like 300 white people every other day was, for me, thinking this is what history is. And once I started volunteering at places like Birmingham Museums and Art Gallery, walking down a corridor, I just see like white office after white office after white office. So to me, that got quite draining at one point, and I found out about Don't Settle at the exact right space. And I kind of want to make a point about marketing and representation here, especially in the sector, because I found this is a postcard. So this is the way Don't Settle advertise their program. I found this in a museum. I was like, that's very strange. A young woman wearing hijab in a museum, that's out of the norm. The reason I'm giving you this long convoluted story is because representation matters, and anyone who says it doesn't is lying because it doesn't account to them. So when we talk about marketing, especially in terms of the heritage sector, and we're talking about galleries and museums, if you're not marketing exhibits to cater for young people or people of colour, it's because the curators themselves aren't people of colour, and they're not exhibiting actual collections that have a more honest retelling of history. So one of the things that I was able to do on a curator project for Don't Settle for 9 months was to retell the story of a heritage house in Birmingham. So this was the house of Matthew Bolton. He was like a big industrialist. People love celebrating him. He's the guy on your £50 note. So we were given the task of basically rewriting a tour for the house. And for us, that was like, yes, we kind of get to dismantle this history about this guy that everyone loves so much. And one of the things we kept coming to working with stakeholders, and that being Birmingham Museums Trust, for example, we kept getting a lot of pushback from people there in terms of exposing the more uncomfortable sides of his history, like the fact that he did sell steam engines, and guess where he sold those steam engines to? Plantations in the West Indies. No one wants to talk about that and that legacy of slavery. So in terms of institutionalized racism within this sector, it's so embedded. They don't like talking about it. They'll write a blog post every once in a while saying we need to become more diverse. And the way they kind of talk about diversifying not only the visitors who come to their spaces, but their workforce, is by using young people and people of colour as an economic profit margin. So their argument is, if we put up more diverse exhibits, we're going to get more money. So it's also humanizing the exhibits they put up. It's humanizing the things that they value in this space. Anyone, any questions so far, any points? I don't just want to be speaking at you guys really fast.
Amira, how did you feel? Obviously, you know, you flip into your textbook you're going through, white faces, okay? Someone that's telling your story, someone who's sort of being put in a position to either believe what you're being told through a textbook or investigate it externally and bring that into your understanding. How did you study differently as a history student to ensure that you didn't just relearn old history and make sure that you sort of learned it in the way that you wanted to understand it and to pass it on to the next generation?
So 100%, I particularly chose my university because I got a lot of options to choose modules I wanted to learn. So I was like, yes, I get to learn about race and I get to learn about slavery in Africa in the 20th century. I was like, get in, I'm there. Turns out all my lecturers are white. So I'm hearing about slavery and like the new Negro movement and all that kind of stuff from a white person. So it did come down to a lot, like if you look at my transcript at this point, it does look like a lot of racial history. That's a lot of things I learned. And it did take like a lot of processing for me personally, like sitting in a seminar with like 15 other white people and someone equating the way veganism is stigmatized to racism is just like one of those moments where you want to go red, but you're black and you're like, I can't, like, it's not going to work out. So it's basically, I feel like in terms of the education system, that's something I wanted to talk about in the heritage sector as well. I think I was failed in a lot of ways in terms of the people who taught me. It wasn't diverse at all. So that is one of the reasons I sought out Don't Settle, and it came at like the right moment for me in my second year, thinking, yes, I get to work with other young people of color and actually uncover untold stories. And that was very important for me. But white kids don't have to do that. They don't have to go out their way to like feel inspired or to feel like they're represented. So that's like just that added obstacle for young people of color again. So in terms of entering the sector in itself, for example, you often need a degree. Young people of colour in the UK, they're less likely to go to Bristol Group universities, they're less likely to go to university even, which means they're less likely to get a 2-1 and get their foot in the door. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that you got to talk about. And when I was reading the mission statement for ERIC, for example, you guys really pushed the idea of intersectionality, and that really comes into every sector that you look at. So the intersectionality of like finances and education. So young people, like for me, volunteering every Friday, I had to turn down shifts because I was like, I need the experience, but like at the same time I'm losing money. And those are things that people in the sector do not think about in terms of accessibility. Accessibility to them is a way to increase visitors, increase their profit margins. They don't look at it as a way to increase their workforce. Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so Ella, like, tell me to shut up at any time you need me to. So I can go on.
No, that was really amazing, and we're going to have like a more of a Q&A at the end. Yeah, just we'll leave it there for now, and then we'll revisit this hopefully. But yeah, thank you guys so much for that. That was like really interesting, and I'm really glad that you made it like interactive. And yeah, thanks again for kind of like taking the time to prepare that and talk to us, because it's so great. And yeah, I kind of didn't really introduce properly this whole the idea of this talk at the beginning, so I'll just very quickly just say, like, this is it's a bit of an eclectic sort of mix of speakers today, but the idea of Air UK generally is to kind of bring together, even though it's a kind of a broad aim, it's to bring together all different sort of forms of anti-institutional racism campaigning and under one umbrella, with a network of, you know, with the stories and the voices of kind of black and people of color at the forefront, but then with a network of all these diverse range of people who want to support the cause as well. And I think that, like, yeah, so for today it's just about just kind of learning from each other and having a conversation about how hopefully yeah, if everyone could kind of just be mindful of how we could turn these conversations into some kind of action as well, like hopefully what people can take away from this, and if anyone has any suggestions of that, you can either shout them out at the end or send a message to Air UK, and we can hopefully try and like make this really proactive as well. But yeah, I will pass over now to our next speakers, Kaz and Janelle from No Ordinary Women Chat Show, who are going to talk a bit about structural racism, and yeah, really excited to have you guys here, so take it away.
Thank you, Ella. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So my name is Kaz. I'm the founder of No Ordinary Woman Chat Show, and basically we started this chat show. It's a platform to inspire, and Janelle joined me, when was it, 2018?
2018.
Yeah, 2018, 2018. So obviously in regards to what's happened with Black George Floyd, and we just felt with our platform, we just needed to really touch on topics such as this. And with us doing so, we had various different speakers who came onto our platform who actually shared from professional perspective, from say like human resources, where companies, when they're actually recruiting staff, the things that they look for, and how that will basically differentiate you being able to get your foot through the door to be able to get an interview, whether they could pronounce your surname or not pronounce your surname. So it's things like that that they were basically discussing on our show. We also had a TV presenter, Leah Charles King, who also shared her story because she's a talent who's been in the industry for over, say, 20 plus years. And recently she shared her story on our platform in terms of when she was going through her career, they basically said that the reason why she can't really excel to the next level is because she is very talented, but because she's Black, literally. So now that's hit into the Evening Standard of recent. And we just felt that what you guys are doing right now, and Ella, thank you so much for reaching out to us, that this is such a time like this that we need to be having this conversation, and that we do need to make a difference right now. So obviously having conversations is what we basically started off from, but it's more about what is the actions, what we actually going to be putting in place. So Janelle,
so like I said, we ran a series called Dear World, We Need to Talk, and within that series, one of those was looking at structural and systemic racism within the workplace. And I guess the reason why we focused on that as one of the subjects is because the workplace is where the majority of us spend the majority of our time. And I think with the tragic death of George Floyd, it opened the floodgate of feelings for many Black people. So it wasn't just the fact that this man was brutally murdered in front of our eyes, but the fact that in 2020, we still are going through these issues. We're still facing these issues. And what it did was triggered accumulation of traumas that we face. And a lot of the time we face those within the workplace. So we haven't really prepared a script for this. We just wanted to kind of talk from the heart and talk from where we're coming from in terms of now Chat Show and providing that platform for people to share, but also for people to come up with solutions, really. So I guess from and we'll talk about our own experiences with in terms of structural and systemic racism within the workplace. But like the guys explained just before us, institutional racism is really, I describe it as a hangover, a really bad hangover of colonialism that's lasted almost 200 years now. And it's no Alka-Seltzer or paracetamol or anything like that is curing this hangover at all. So it's persistent, and it's the structures that are in place now post-colonialism. They were set up during colonialism, and so those structures are institutionally racist. You know, in terms of the people that are in there, that maybe the kind of policies, the way of thinking, the cultures within these organizations, and of course that trickles down into the workplace. So for example, for myself, in my 20-year corporate career, there's only one, and I've worked at a number of different organizations, there's only one organization that I've worked in that I haven't come up against structural and systemic racism. And when we talk about that, we're talking about unconscious bias. So somebody may not intentionally be racist, but because of their experiences over time and the things that they're exposed to in the media, certain false narratives that they're exposed to, they have a certain belief system that then makes them deal with you or treat you in a way that's different to perhaps your white colleague. Microaggressions, we talk about that and what that looks like, and we'll give a couple of examples of our own, and also white privilege and how that plays into the workplace. And white privilege is something that many white people until now weren't actually aware of. They weren't aware of their own white privilege and how that interplays and could disadvantage certain people in the workplace. So as I said, in my 20-year career, there's only one organization that I've worked at that I haven't experienced that, which is shocking. And I've left organizations, multiple organizations, because of that treatment. I felt that I didn't have anywhere to turn to or anybody to talk to, because most of the time my managers were white. In fact, all of the time my managers were white. And if I raised something, and first of all, I would be hesitant to say it's because of the color of my skin, even though I knew it was because of the color of my skin. I'd be hesitant to say that because we're so conditioned to project white fragility. This is another term, but we've been so conditioned over the years and through colonialism to protect white fragility that we don't want to say these things in case we offend somebody. So I've never really been able to articulate it to managers that I've had in the past. And when I have done, I have been told that it's not, no, it can't be to do, it can't be to do with your skin color. I can't accept that. It must be something else. Maybe it's a personality clash. And I'm always talked down, or I have always been talked down. And so in the end, I just said, to hell with this. And I leave. Now, in the current role that I'm in, I'm going to give an example, and then I'll pass over to Kaz, because Kaz, has quite a really distressing example. But I'll give an example. So I'm managing a really large project on behalf of a local authority. I was brought in because the project was failing, and I have helped turn that project around. And now that project is almost complete and is extremely successful. And it got the attention of the BBC One show. They came along and they said, "Oh, we'd love to interview you." And I said, "Great, yeah." So they interviewed me, and it was great. There was a lot of good feedback from that. When I went into the workplace the next day, my colleagues, who are all white, turned around and said, "Oh, we saw you on the One show. Oh my God, didn't you speak so well? You were so articulate. Didn't you speak so well? It wasn't, Janelle, wow, well, you did a fantastic job. Well done." It was almost in shock that I could basically articulate in front of a camera. Now, Kaz and I do this all the time. Not that they would know that, but why wouldn't I be able to? Why was it so shocking? So that's just one example, and there are many others that I can talk of. One in particular is when you go into work and you feel like you're under the microscope more than your white counterparts, and it's happening, and they may come in late and it's not an issue, but if you're 1 minute late, suddenly it's a big problem. Or you might say something and you're accused of being aggressive, whereas your colleague says something and there's no noise around it. So these are just a few examples in my own personal experience, but these examples are so widespread that now it cannot be denied that most work organizations or workplaces have issues around systemic and structural racism that absolutely oppress the individuals that are there. And all that happens is that you just accumulate trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, and you just become so weighed down and so heavy that you really feel hopeless a lot of the time. So it's great that you're having this conversation. But Kaz, I'll leave you to talk about your experience.
For my experience, this was quite a few years back, and it was for a big brand. I was actually on a modeling gig, going to Budapest, and it was a group of us. It was like about 5 women. The 5 women was the 4 main women, including myself, but there was a double. And can you guys guess who that double was for? The double was for me, because I was the only Black woman that was there in the group. So that double, basically, she had to be the double for the stills.
But she
was white, by the way. She was a double for the stills. She was double for the commercials. So everything literally I did, she had to be the double for that, because basically what they were saying is various parts of the world, which we know it to be, do not want to see Black people. So therefore they had to have a double to ensure that they could be able to sell that commercial, to sell that still magazine, whatever it is, to those certain parts of the world. Now, if I had known that from the beginning, and that was explained to me, it would then be, I would have been able to understand the journey that I was about to start. I had no idea. So when we got to the airport, I was thinking, okay, so who's this person for? Do you know what I mean? It's only when I looked in the handbook, that's when I saw this person was going to be my double. So whilst I was on the journey, because this gig was on for about 5 days, throughout that journey, there were certain things that was actually happening throughout that job. And it was basically just meant that there was less time for me, or they wanted to put a lighter foundation on me, and I was like, no, that's not my skin color. So they had an issue with me. They didn't like the way that I was responding, because the way they saw it is, you're getting paid, you're here for a job, we can do whatever I want to do with you. And I literally was like, no, I'm not doing it. So it was like I was a problem. But the thing is, for me, what was so more like, how can I say, the journey for me, it was more that throughout my head, I couldn't explain what I was feeling. So you just feel as if it's in your imagination, even though you know you're going through it. And that's something that I think Eugene was mentioning, how it just feels, it's like it's not there, it's invisible. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you can't actually pinpoint what it is that you're actually going through. But because it's so embedded, because it's a structure of how they run their organization, you can't even question it, because to them, this is the norm. So when I actually had to meet, well, not even meet, and when we had breakfast on the last day, the other 4 girls that was actually part of the old production, they didn't really understand what was going on, but only one woman actually called me up and said, Kaz, you're right, do you want to talk? I was like, girl, I'm cool, do you know what I mean? I'm fine. But when we actually sat down for breakfast, the production team actually apologized to me publicly and said, look, we're really sorry what you actually went through, but unfortunately, certain parts of the world, they just do not want to see Black people. And that was only in 2010. Do you get what I'm saying? So for me to go through that as a Black woman, it just made me feel like, damn, you know, is this really how this BS is out here? Do you know what I mean? And it was, because I went through it, it was like it was in my imagination. Even being in Budapest, the people would stare at me, you know, kids would stare at me, people would stare at me. And when I'm saying to one of the girls that I'm working with, I'm like, I don't understand why these people stare at me. And they're like, because you're beautiful. I'm like, no, because I'm Black, you know, them ways there. And they just didn't understand where I was coming from, because they're not my skin color. So they couldn't understand it. But it does make you feel as if you've got some kind of a mental issue because of the way that you've been treated. You know, anytime you do challenge it, things, because I work in the beauty industry, I'm about to leave that. But even with that, I mean, it's a lot. I can carry on with stories and stories, which I'm not going to really bore you guys with it. But what I'm saying is, this thing is real and it needs to be dealt with. It just, the structure needs to be, it just needs to be dismissed. It really does. And I feel that more organizations need to be talking about this so that they can take responsibility as well for themselves to how they're actually dealing with people. Because the truth be told, they are responsible for this shit, do you know what I mean? And it's about us having these real conversations so that we can just move forward, because you guys are the new generation. So if we don't have these conversations, when is it going to happen? We're going to keep on repeating over and over and over again, and we need to, this needs to stop.
Yeah, we can't keep repeating the same conversations. And you know, I mean, when Kaz told me about that experience, I was horrified. Was I shocked? No, I wasn't shocked, which in itself is a problem. I should be shocked by that, because to treat anybody like that should be shocking, but it wasn't, because we've become so conditioned to this kind of treatment. The sad thing about work organizations is that, like Kaz said, most of the time, you know, it's not people of color in positions that make certain decisions, and so their decision is going to be biased based on the skin that they are in. They can't understand the experience that you live. They can't understand it because they're not living it. So the only way that we can now start to really expose these issues and dismantle these structures and the structural and the systemic racism that exists in the workplace is really by having an open and honest conversation, and people being willing to be uncomfortable, not being defensive or even offensive in terms of you know, in terms of quipping back, but actually really just listening openly and honestly. Because when you have a diverse workforce and you encourage everybody to thrive within your diverse workforce, guess what happens? Your whole organization is going to thrive. Absolutely. When you stifle certain elements of your workforce, you're stifling your organization in general, because those individuals are not able to be their true authentic selves, show up to work and be their true authentic selves, and they're not able to explore their full potential and their full talent, and therefore collectively as an organization, you're not going to experience your full potential and your true capability as an organization, and really stand out and shine. And so I guess how we wanted to end was to ask, because again, it's about education. So just to ask maybe a couple of you to, if you would like to, and if you're happy to, just to share some examples of systemic racism or unconscious bias or a microaggression within the workplace, so that people understand what it looks like.
Just, yeah, an example.
That's a classic. Yeah,
that's a classic.
That's a classic example, and what actually it demonstrates. Because some people might think, well, what's the problem with that? The problem is that you're being objectified as a novelty, like you said, and something of fascination, rather than just the person that you are. Somebody could comment, she could say, oh, your hair looks great. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no need for touch.
Yeah, there's no need for that whatsoever.
Exactly.
Is there anybody else who'd like to give an example?
I have one. So this happened about a month ago. I'm working at a supermarket. So about a month ago, a woman who comes in all the time, and I actually thought was really sweet, she came up to the till and was talking to me and another guy that I work with. And she looked at him and she goes, "You look like you went to university." And he was like, "No, I didn't, but she did." And she asked me about what the term dystopian means, because it was in the early stages of coronavirus. So she wanted to use the word dystopian to describe what was going on. And then at the end of it, she looked at me and she goes, "So where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, I lived in London before Brighton." And she was like, "No, like, where are you from?" I was like, "Okay, my mum's Kenyan." And she goes, "Oh, I would have thought South African." Firstly, anyone who knows South African accents knows that this is not the voice of someone that's South African. Secondly, what about me versus the white male that was beside me made her think she could assume which one of us went to university. There's just a lot of layers that were going on. But in that situation, if I'd have snapped at her, I would have been the angry black woman. She would have just been like, "Oh, I was just taking an interest." So I had to, the burden was on me to remain calm and polite because I was at work. When really I should have cussed her the fuck out.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah.
But the thing is, even when we do that, it doesn't resolve anything. Do you know what I mean? Because then it just continues for them to have this stereotype of us, like you said, of that angry black woman, which you're not. You understand what I'm saying? But it's like they still don't take the responsibility of their own action. Is that the right thing for her to do? Absolutely not. But in her head, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And these are the reasons why we need to have these conversations, that they get the understanding of why it's not fine. Why do you feel that you can stereotype and make that assumption that I am not the person that went to university, but he did because he's white? Do you understand what I'm saying? So these are the reasons why we need to have these conversations, so we can learn.
Yeah. And one of the things in terms of learning, and I think we'll wrap up unless anyone else has an example, but one of the things in terms of learning is really learning how to challenge people when they come with that kind of crap, to be honest, to you. It's really difficult because, like you said, you just wanted to cuss her out. That's your natural reaction because you're offended, and that's normal for you to think, how dare you speak to me like that? But one of the things that I found, and this has been a lifelong learning for me, and I'm still learning, is a really powerful question is a one-word question, or a couple of word questions, but is, why do you think that? And what that does is that makes that person who is, you know, portraying, conveying their stereotypes onto you, or conveying their unconscious bias onto you, or whatever it is, they have to now start to dismantle their own thinking, their own bias. It's really simple, it's really straightforward, but I would encourage any of you in a situation like that to say, why do you think that? Just like for me at work, I said to my colleagues, why would you think I wouldn't be articulate on TV? And then what you find is people start stumbling over their words, like, well,
yeah.
And you just remain calm, because that's the way that you are really try and dig into their own psyche to get them to try and dismantle their own thought process and their own thought structure. So
and I know you're trying to wrap up, but I didn't want this opportunity to pass without saying that I'm a massive advocate for education, and I think we spoke about not being able to get experience in some cases, and so you sort of go the education route. Maybe I'll take the risk and go and do an extra degree, or I might try and travel the world if I can afford that, or trying to do anything else you can to try and skill yourself up. So when you sit for that interview with your original name, that you can look past that challenge and say, well, actually, what about the qualifications I have, or maybe what about the experience I've managed to get in a voluntary capacity, or whatever that thing might be. And I think one of the examples that comes to my mind is being told that you don't have to mention your qualifications every time,
Ooh.
So after I've spent all the years I have doing what I've done, surely I've gained the right to mention that I've completed what I've done when I'm trying to make a point about something that I feel like I have a bit of sway in, that I might be able to, lend a bit of insight into, because, I don't know, maybe because I've studied a really long time to understand that information, and being told that, when you introduce yourself, you don't have to refer to what you studied, or being told that, when you try to make a point, you haven't got to reference, how you came to know that. Why not? Because when I walk into a room, it's not assumed that I know what I'm talking about. And so, unfortunate for everyone in the room, they've got to now listen to an extra long introduction in order for me to set the scene, and then allow me to then make a very simple point that my mate over here, Tommy, will have made anyway. So no one's questioning what Tommy would have known, and no one's questioning what Tommy would have brought to the table. But in my case, I feel that is something that, when you've earned something, you want to sort of celebrate that. You sort of discourage from doing that. And that can be quite difficult, particularly in a corporate setting or a professional setting, where you're being challenged on that. I think it's really unfortunate, particularly when you put the time in to try and better yourself and become more learned.
Was that comment made to you in an interview? Can I just ask?
It's made to me in a few different settings. So which one do you want to hear about?
Okay, I think knowing that it's in a few different settings is enough. The reason I asked that is because you just reminded me of one last experience I will share in an interview. I was interviewed to be the events manager, the head of events and filming with Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea. And one of the things that within that portfolio would have been looking after Carnival. And two white guys interviewing me, one who was doing the role from Brighton, and immediately I went into that interview. It was immediately apparent to me that they were not fans of Notting Hill Carnival whatsoever. But there was a point in the interview where they said, oh, we think you'll deal, the stakeholders we deal with are really difficult to deal with, and we think you'd be really good at dealing with them. Because, after all, this is an event that was born out of anarchy. This was in an interview. So that's why I ask you that, because it happens, it's not just in the workplace, it's even before you get into your role that this kind of stuff can happen. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. But also, just to close, if you guys do want to watch any of our episodes, it's on YouTube, or you can follow us on Instagram, Now Chat Show UK. That's on our Instagram, and on our YouTube, you can also just go to Now Chat Show, and everything is there. So please feel free to subscribe and follow us, and also give us some feedback as well. We always love feedback. Yeah. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, that was really, really interesting. And if you want to post any links into the chat so that people can follow them, then please do. But you're also, all of the speakers are tagged on our Instagram post. So if anyone wants to kind of be able to go onto Instagrams and things like that, and then that's available. So yeah, obviously really want to encourage everyone to go and support all of the speakers that are speaking tonight. We're running slightly behind time, but I'm not gonna apologize for that, because I feel like it's just been, I'm glad that we are, because everything we've heard so far has been just really, really valuable. But yeah, just as a disclaimer, this will probably run on to a bit later than it was originally planned to, but obviously if anyone needs to leave, then do. But we're going to just move on now to Jinsella from Deducation, who's the last guest speaker, and then after that we'll do the Q&A. So Jinsella, hopefully you're still
hello there. How are you all doing? Can you hear me?
Good. Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you to No Talk and Don't Settle. I've looked through your pages and what you guys are doing, and it's been really amazing to look at and to see your progressive projects. First of all, I should say as well that I'm sad because my my other co-founder and like, you know, best friend, she was supposed to be leading this talk. She is French Congolese, so throughout her activism journey that like we've shared together, I've seen the way that we've been treated differently, and you know, the different challenges we've had together, which obviously she has had in a completely different page. So yeah, unfortunately she couldn't be here. But basically, before I talk about what we set up and what we're doing, and I hope that it will be, you know, for me, I see the issue that we are confronting as an opportunity to kind of break down some of the institutional racism and just like complete inhumane practices that, you know, are spreading around the world, as an opportunity. So hopefully it will be a little bit of light and, you know, something that we're trying to pinpoint and tackle. So before I give you the debrief on that, actually no, I'll just start by saying who we are. So we're Demilitarized Education, Deducation for short, or DED. And basically we're a community and guide for modern day peacemakers. That's our like communication front, and the way we want to bring lots of different people in to platform their opinions, learn with us, and go on this journey towards world peace. And on the back burner, we are doing a lot of research led by Melina, my partner, which basically we're trying to become and working very hard to become a catalyst for higher education to transform militarism and support peace. Now, this comes from the fact that universities invest in the arms trade. They partner with arms companies on research. So student labour is actually being used to develop weapons which are being used in conflict zones around the world. And also there's like a lot of issues with the way engineering and topics like this are taught without any consideration. Like, you know, I have friends that tell me that we literally had no ethics classes. We literally had no classes on how these weapons could be misused, or, you know, what the greater consequences of this industry is. Yet our university has so many ways that they funnel students into career paths with arms companies. And we have BAE systems on campus at the University of Manchester at career fairs, even though there's crazy evidence for the corrupt bribes they've had to sell weapons and the position they hold in the war in Yemen happening right now. So yeah, what I planned to do was start by literally just defining militarism, because essentially the arms trade is, you know, a tool, a capitalist tool of militarism. So good old Google definition, militarism, the arms trade is a product of militarism, which is the belief that a country should maintain strong military capacity and be prepared to use it aggressively to defend or promote national interest. Now, if that isn't like a petri dish for colonial practices, for discrimination and racism, like, I don't know what is. And I think as well, I was thinking when now you guys were talking just about your story with being discriminated in that way for market reasons, you know, like they're saying that it's not going to sell well in this country, and being led by the kind of supply and demand that leads that market, which essentially uphold discrimination and racist structures all across the world. And this is exactly what's happening with the arms trade. It's market led. There's like a really tight circle of arms companies with defense ministers and people in government. It's absolutely riddled with bribes and corruption. And when the Q&A starts, I'll put in a couple of links to look at the extensive research on that corruption. but yeah, we call it a revolving door, where basically arms companies, government officials and whatnot are just kind of like schmoozing each other and working together to continue increasing this market so that more weapons are put across the world, and, you know, discrimination and racist biases are upheld in incredibly aggressive and violent ways. Coming back to the University of Manchester, because we are focusing our campaign on university divestment and demilitarisation, the University of Manchester is involved with like so many arms companies, but I had a particular, okay, I'll just go back a little bit, all right, and just start on how this started, how my journey started, and I guess as like a white British person, how I just had my eyes completely wide open to the corruption and just things which the government are upholding, which I was like, these surely aren't British values. This is not what I've been taught, and like not what I think of what's going on here. So yeah, I was told about Stop Dicey, which is the arms fair which happens in London every other year, and I was there with Ella last year. So big ups, Ella. And yeah, essentially when I got there, I was like, what? We literally seeing huge battleships coming in, military helicopters, and grandmas are being pulled out the road for trying to stop weapons going into a market where military forces from Israel, Saudi Arabia, and horrible regimes all across the world are coming to buy weapons freely. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really had no idea. So I started to talk to a few people, and when I got back to Manchester Uni, I set up the campaign against Arms Trade Society, thinking I'll just raise a little bit more awareness on this particular topic. I got there and I found out all about how the university is involved as well. Now, I went to a Q&A with the vice president of the University of Manchester, and this whole conversation is on YouTube. And I said to her, at what point, because our ethical investment policy states that we won't deal with military regimes or anything to do with armament, right? So I said to her, you know, one, we're clearly breaking our policy. She said, no, we're not. I said to her, okay, so at what point does human life in other countries and research take a lower importance than commercial interest? And she said to me, and she literally she smirks and she says, well, while our government does it, why wouldn't we? And I was like, I'd laid down facts about the crisis in Yemen and said we're dealing with BAE Systems, even though they're a huge perpetrator of this war. And she still, you know, she couldn't see that she was doing anything wrong. She used the example, well, Rolls-Royce, yeah, we deal with Rolls-Royce who create weapons, but they also put the steel in your buses, so you're not going to get the bus. Just a shocker. And then I said to her, but you state as an institution that you are politically unbiased. And she said, yeah, we are. We don't take a stance. And I said to her, but you're dealing with Israel. You're investing money in Israel. You're building educational partnerships with Israel, helping them progress their military and essentially their apartheid. You're not, you know, if you could turn around to me and say, oh, we invest and we partner with the same amount of Palestinian people, maybe we could have like more of a level conversation about it, but that's not what's happening. And this economic bias is completely underestimated and almost just put under the carpet a little bit, because it's the free market. And, you know, this is what we always hear is, oh, if we weren't doing it, who someone else would be, which actually isn't true. There's a lot of research saying that we have such strong links with Saudi Arabia that actually if we stopped selling weapons to them and pulled out the UK personnel who are training the Saudi military and, you know, helping with their enforcements and missile targeting, then they'd actually have to pretty much start their military infrastructure again, because they wouldn't have the knowledge and the equipment to fix their machines because it's so British led. So yeah, basically just thinking about all that, bringing it back to today and the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd. It's been really interesting for me because I was a fashion student, so I really I wasn't into politics really, and I found all this out and was like, wow, this is some shady shit. And to know that it was happening in my university, where my money is literally contributing directly to this, let alone my Palestinian friends or my Somali friends or whoever it is, their money is going towards these conflicts and supporting an industry which clearly upholds racism, discrimination, and genocide. So, what was I going to? Oh yeah, I've been a peace activist, you know, since going to that arms fair 3 years ago, and I've been talking about demilitarization and stuff. And what's been really interesting for me over the past few weeks is some of my friends, because of the way that George Floyd was treated and the way that activists are now being treated on the streets, they're starting to say to me, I see what you mean. And I understand why militarism is actually related to you. And because they can actually see it, they can see the military enforcement on the streets, which is oppressing, you know, your everyday activists, just normal people. And it's become a lot closer issue to, you know, just literally some of my friends who have heard me like this for a long time, but actually didn't understand it and actually didn't feel that connection to it. So yeah, I think from here, intersectionality is key, and I think the more you delve into these topics, the more you understand it. And like how we're using discussion now to learn from one another, that's an essential part of it. You know, it's strength with numbers and it's strength with understanding. And within our universities, I think that if we can really attach the inhumane and the racist practices which are happening at the other end of these investments, then we can really start to break down the way it happens. And we should have power within our universities. Students are the same vice chancellor that said all this to me, said on camera as well, that actually students are the biggest investor. So they're upholding the university. Their job is thanks to these student investors, or just students. And when we look at international students as well, that's their biggest source of income. So I think it's an essential part of the anti-racism movement to really shine light on the arms trade and really shine light on the way that our educational institutions are upholding it and supporting it. And a positive, and why we say transform militarism supporting peace, is because to move away from military and arms investments within our universities creates space for so much more research and opportunity for industries which should actually help the world and break down other issues like poverty and climate change and you know, everything that goes into this pool of horribleness that the world is at the moment. So yeah, I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to say. And just, yeah, I'll just go on the final point of like, as Demilitarised Education, we are really trying to platform different voices, and I mean by that people in conflict zones, people who are researchers, people who are content creators, me, like fashion background, and just bring loads of different minds together to look more positively at a demilitarized world and actually try and visualize and make space for the idea that world peace could happen. I know it is so far off and so hard to imagine, but it needs to be there in the projection, because everything we see with the arms trade and the vast destruction that that does for the environment, for equality, for literally killing people, is a construct. It has been made, and it's a colonial construct. So yeah, more than ever, let's never forget about it, and never forget the power that the arms trade have in the government circle and within our institutions. And, you know, it's our democratic right to say hell no. So yeah, let's do it.
Thank you so much, Jinsella. That was so, yeah, so informative, and yeah, it's just like, I think it is really relevant because you know, it is basically one of the biggest institutions really when you think about it, like the arms trade in this country, and yeah, like you said, it upholds, like it basically just, you know, is a massive part of oppressing the global south basically, and anyway, yeah, so just quickly, so we'll do the Q&A in 2 secs. So the event was kind of meant to end at 9:15, so if anyone obviously does need to leave now, then please do, but if anyone wants to hold on for the Q&A, I think it's going to be interesting. And then just two very quick things before we do the Q&A. One is that we're going to start doing at these bi-weekly Thursday meetings, so anyone who hasn't been before, we're going to be doing these like Zoom events open to the public every other Thursday, so please do come again if you've enjoyed tonight, which I really have. We're going to start doing like a suggestion of, we're going to be posting on our Instagram one recommendation of something to read, like just an article, nothing, not a whole book, one thing to listen to and one thing to watch before the next meeting in 2 weeks time. So if it's kind of like a bit of a challenge to yourself to try and yeah, read, watch and listen to those 3 things, so just keep an eye on our Instagram. We're going to be posting that up tomorrow, I think, on our story. So yeah, just for everyone who's here, if you're interested, then look out for those recommendations. I think they're going to be really interesting this week. And then yeah, also I'll just quickly hand over to Georgie, if you're cool with that, just to make a quick announcement about a couple of charities that we wanted to highlight this week, in case anyone wanted to donate.
Cool. I'm going to drop these into, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to drop these into the chat, the links into the chat, but we just wanted to highlight a couple of charities this week that we'd really like you to support. Donate if you can, please. So the first is Aid Box Community. They provide funds to buy non-perishable food and essential living items for distribution to self-isolating, destitute refugees and asylum seekers. Obviously incredibly important. If you can support, please do. And our second is Refugees at Home. These match people with a spare room in their homes with refugees and asylum seekers who need a place to stay. Again, really important initiative. I'll just drop these into the chat so you have the links. Yeah.
Thanks, Georgie. Yeah, I think we're going to try and just highlight 1 or 2 charities at our events every week, just so that, yeah, if anyone can spare like a couple of pounds, then obviously, because there's, yeah, you know, there's 40 of us here, so 40 times £2 or £3 each is a lot of money. So I think it'd be nice to use the people power to and we're going to try and highlight charities that are, like, you know, not so well known, and who are really doing like community-based projects that you know, especially the reason we chose refugee charities this week is because it has just been National Refugee Week, so it kind of felt topical. And also, you know, I don't need to explain the link between racism and refugees, obviously, but yeah, cool. All right, well we'll kind of, I'm just going to pass over to Kane now, who can host the Q&A.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah. We got yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I thought we were just going to do kind of a free
Well, yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was going so well already. But basically, I think we've got about 10-15 minutes to do a quick Q&A. If anyone has anything to say, just kind of put your hand up and unmute yourself. If anyone has a question but doesn't feel comfortable talking, just send a message directly to me, and I'm happy to read it out for you. Or you can put it in the group chat yourself, whatever suits you. But probably it's best to keep it concise and clear and direct it either at all three or well, 5 speakers, or directly at someone. But if anyone has anything to ask now, please go ahead. I can. I mean, I can't see anyone, so I can start. I found the dialogue about heritage really interesting, especially because I'm someone who works in that industry. I was just wondering how you both felt about the idea of museums being this kind of oppressive location, and then the calls to contextualize, you know, Edward Colston, whoever, in said oppressive institutions. I think there's been a dialogue about getting them there, but not so much about what happens when they're there, and how can we trust these museums with these narratives when we haven't been able to trust them with anything else.
That's a very, very important point. And I think a lot of people have been talking about how do we confront these uncomfortable histories. And I think it's as simple as saying it's uncomfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable, reckon with that. So anyone who does curate a kind of exhibit like that, I think cross collaboration is so vital in that space. You need researchers who are people of color, who do research into that specific area, who can contextualize it for the public in a way that they can understand, like the complex histories of slavery, for example, through a simple exhibit. So a lot of it comes from having open dialogue, especially with other organizations who probably wouldn't be in the heritage sector a lot. That would be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can attest to everything you're saying, Amira, but just maybe an example of that is like how a lot of these statues, you know, have done graffiti on them, or like, for example, put the symbol of putting a noose around their neck, or like just painting the statue red and stuff. I think even when there is that decision made, and hopefully that was a decision made with people of color within that panel to make that decision, that they keep those, because that in itself, again, is the symbol that this was a toppled statue. And obviously, even embedded within the description of it, you know, the truth is sort of expressed in that. So it's not just about cleaning up the statue and putting it in a nice, shiny new corner, but really showing what, how did that statue get there, and why is it where it is, if that makes sense.
Just to press you on that, is there a third space that's not, you know, in the public, you know, part of the built environment, left untouched in the public space, and not in the museum? Is there somewhere else where these things could be contextualized?
That is a pretty good question, to be honest.
I think community spaces work very well in that respect, especially if you do pop-up exhibits, because then you can have a quick turnover of actual exhibits that prioritize people of color. So I haven't seen a lot of that. I think I've seen one in London, but it's something that again requires funding. And when you talk about heritage and the arts, it's a sector that's really, really struggling with that.
I think, I mean, just to say, maybe move on a little from the statue itself, I think what might be a more important argument is what gets put up in its place. I think that's sort of more important in terms of then appropriately representing a community or someone of color. And I think that is also quite a bold statement, and it doesn't even matter what's done with the old statue.
That's exactly something we did in our curator project in a house that belonged to a white man who perpetuated slavery. Let's say it literally in one of the bedrooms, we put up pictures of 3 black businesswomen. And that's the way we approached a lot of our tour, that we replaced a lot of things by contextualizing it in the area it's set in. So we prioritize like artists of color, so South Asian artists, and it again comes from who you give the power to make change. And sometimes you're not given that, so sometimes you do have to be unapologetic and take it.
Yeah, amazing answers. Are there any other questions to any?
I had one question to, I believe your name is Kaz from Now Chat. I was really compelled when I heard your story about having a double for a modeling job. It was something I personally, as a white person, have never heard of. And it was really, really interesting and quite jarring to hear that something, you know, as I guess like booking a job and you think you're going to go and everything will be fine, and then suddenly there's another person in your place. I'm just curious to think, was that an isolated one-time situation for you, or have you experienced that in places like the UK or other countries?
No, it was on this gig, it was the first time that I've ever experienced anything like this. It's for a massive brand, and it's for a massive brand. It's for Dove.
Yeah, no, don't.
And yeah, it is what it is. It's for Dove. And yeah, to be quite honest, they didn't actually tell me anything about it, because I think this is something that more than likely, this is what they generally deal with all the time. So it wasn't something that was, you know, shocking for them. I think they were more explain themselves, because obviously they can see and feel from me that it was something that made me feel uncomfortable, because I didn't come and join like the dinner party the following day and things like that. That same night, that same night, I didn't join their dinner party because I just didn't want to be a part of it, you know, as you can imagine. But I wanted to finish off the job because that's what I got paid to do. But if they had explained that to me at the beginning, I think I would have had different reservation to it all, to be quite honest, because I would have questioned it more. Why not, you know? But obviously it wasn't something that was optional for me. The way they just saw it is, you're here to do a job, and they explained at the end of the job to why that actually happens. Yeah, so I don't think it's something that is new. I think this is something that generally they do, but obviously it's not an area that I'm always doing. It was just that particular job itself that I experienced it. Yeah.
I also have a question for you ladies as well. Sort of personal, less so about what you guys do. I was just wondering, as Black women navigating the corporate world, how do you deal with microaggressions and sometimes overt racism? Last year I went to a Galdem talk. I don't know if you ever heard of Galdem, and Diane Abbott spoke, and she said that her advice to us all was to sort of police ourselves in the workplace and to never give your full self, so that it, I guess, couldn't be used against you, and so you didn't get too attached to people, so it didn't hurt your feelings when people that you think are friends are racist towards you, I guess. And it just never really sat well with me, because I don't really like the idea of having to police myself, especially if I'm the one that's being having like transgressions done against me. Any advice would be welcome, thank you.
That's my answer, because I'm still learning, I'm still going through it. So Janelle's the best person to give you that response.
I'm not surprised that Diane Abbott responded like that. I have a lot of respect for her. She has been through a lot, but she is coming from an old school way, which is turn the other cheek. You know, of our parents' generation and their generation before that. Don't make yourself don't make yourself too much of a spectacle, and just keep your head down. That's how we were told. Certainly our generation and generations before were told to progress and get on in the workplace. What I can tell you is that didn't work, because if it did, you'd see us at all levels of society, and you don't see us at all levels of society. And you're right, it's not, the onus shouldn't be on you to police yourself. The onus should be on everybody to police their own behaviour and to be conscious of the fact that they need to think before they speak, and understand that certain things that they say can offend others. So what I would encourage you to do if you come across overt racism, that's really, really, really easy to call out. If somebody is overtly racist, you can just say it straight away. That is racist, that's offensive, and that's easy. It becomes harder when it's microaggressions and it's less tangible and it's embedded in the structures. What I would encourage you to do is gather examples, because isolated incidents can just be isolated incidents and can be easily dismissed in that moment.
The HR.
Exactly. So gather examples, and then with those examples, you build up a picture, because it's often the picture that makes sense rather than just individual pieces of the puzzle. And once you've built up that picture, then you have evidence to say, look, this is continually happening and it is a problem. It's a problem for me, and this is how it's impacting me, and you need to do something about it. Obviously, the first port of call is your manager, but if you don't feel comfortable going to your manager, you can always go straight to HR, and HR have an obligation to investigate. Often, what we're not told to do when we go into the workplace is when things like this happen, you document everything. It sounds laborious. And it is laborious in some respects, but just like you might journal, you keep a log of everything. So if somebody spoke to you and they said something to you, you keep a log of that, the time, the day, who was present at the time. And once you are able to build up a picture, then you're able to tackle it. In other instances, like I said before, sometimes people can say certain things that you can challenge their thinking. So just like the lady in the supermarket that said, oh, he went to university. So I would have challenged her and said, well, why is it you think I didn't go to university? So that's a good way as well. And you can do that within the workplace. It depends on what the microaggression is, but you can often do that in the workplace too. But certainly keep a log of these things. And sadly, yes, we do want to go into work is where we spend most of our time, and we do feel like we want to go into work to make friends. One of the things I've learned is that you go to work to make money. You don't go to work to make friends. If you make friends, that's a bonus. It's a bonus. It's on top. It's as we say in Jamaica, it's brata. It's bonus, but it's not the standard. You go to work to make money.
Definitely, I totally agree with that, Janelle. Definitely. Hello. All right. I've had an incident of racism. Well, I've had plenty. I work in a school. I'm a deputy head of year. So it was the Christmas party. I don't go to anything to do with work because I'm not really interested. I'm there for the kids, not for the staff. But came from a wedding with one of my colleagues. She said, oh, let's pop into the hotel. Because the Christmas party was there. I'm like, oh, no, I don't really want to. But anyway, we went. So as we're walking in, the outside is glass, so you can see it in. And one of the members of staff said, oh, hi, Lisa, you nigger. So I'm like, pardon? Hi, Lisa, you nigger. So I'm like, Michael, do you know what you just said? Yeah, I called you a nigger. My dad's got a lot of friends in South Africa. This was the Christmas party. So I said to my friend, you know what? I'm going home, because I was just about to punch him in the face. And obviously it's a work too. Look through the window and I could see the deputy head, 2 deputy heads there. So I had a rotten Christmas because it was the Christmas holiday thing. The day we got back from the Christmas holidays, I reported it, and he didn't deny it at all. So he did actually get the sack, because 2 of my other work colleagues heard it, and he didn't think that there was anything wrong with him calling me a nigger, because that's what they say in South Africa. So I've had that as well, you know. So, and I've had where black parents come in, they're a bit aggy. They call me to deal with the black parents. You know, I haven't made the meeting with the black parents, but they will call me because I'm black to deal with the black parents. So I have actually told them, I'm sick and tired of it. It's your meeting, you deal with it. If you can't deal with the parent, call the police. And that's just how it is, you know? Yeah. So
you're not the spokesperson for all black people. That's another.
That's what they've. And because I'm a bit ghetto, I'm not gonna lie. Do you understand? Yeah, I'm a bit street and whatever. So they always call me Lisa. Oh, Lisa, did you come in? I never called the parent in. I'm sick and tired of dealing with parents that are aggressive. Then I've got to calm them down. and then they want me in the meeting when it's not my meeting. I've got things to do. I run a year group, you know. I'm not dealing with somebody else's bullshit, to be quite honest with you. Excuse me, Nyla, my niece is on there. Yeah. So yeah, that's it really.
Thank you, Lisa. Basically, I'm going to read out the couple of questions on the chat. I think that will be all for the Q&A, just to get everything well, kind of on time as we can be. So Molly asks, with regard to the issue of silence when it comes to any company where those in high positions are remaining silent about the issue of diversity and representation, how do we hold them accountable for their silence? I guess that is put forward to anyone, any of the speakers who want to answer.
That's a tough one.
I would just say something. There's quite a lot of different initiatives. Actually, I can send you guys, I'll send the link in the chat. But one that I know that I've suggested and spoke about in my workplace is the blueprint. So it's basically kind of, it's like getting a gold star for effort. So if your business doesn't hold up any, well, if your business is anti-racist, you have good progression of your black talent or your black employees from the bottom throughout the whole business. You nurture your black talent, your black employees. You're awarded with a certificate, which basically just says, great job, you're not a racist company. But the way that the blueprint works is they have a regular review system. So you can get your little gold star stripped away from you. And this is something that I think a few media companies now have kind of got involved in. But I think it's something that could be rolled out more widely across more companies, and the more it grows, the more kind of importance is placed on whether or not you have your blueprint certificate. But there are lots of other, I can find more examples, but there are lots of other certificates that kind of are a third party that that check and balance the company rather than it being an internal thing.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that before we move on to the next one?
I would say question it personally. Oh, hi, sorry. Yeah, I would say question it. I think it's not just about understanding the racial side of it, but also understand the psychology of someone's thinking almost, and try and delve into why they think like that, almost to rewire. Obviously, you can't always change the way somebody thinks, but then again, it's just by you doing that will maybe change the way they think on that specific thing, if you understand what I mean. Yeah,
I just want to add to that, because that's like a great point in terms of challenging the way people think, also challenge the way they hire people. So the biggest excuse we'll get from people across sectors is people of colour don't apply. That's because, have you ever thought about the accessibility requirements? When you ask people for certain things, do you make it as easy for them to apply? Can they send in a video instead? Like, does their CV have to look a certain way? There's certain barriers that they never consider, and they just put it down to, well, people of colour don't apply. That isn't reason enough. When I look at places of when I want to do like an internship or something, if I just see a bunch of white people on your team, I'm not applying, because that clearly tells me my values do not align with your company. So it's questioning people over and over again. And same with like senior leadership, you have to hold them accountable. One thing that I've learned to do is be unapologetic, and that's a hard thing to do. It's like a thought process that you have to get your mind around. But in the same way Janelle was saying that question people when they say certain microaggressions, you can do the same thing in a hiring sphere. That's just a take.
So it's a great response. I'm just going to do one last question because of time. So where Martha asked, where do you send people who want to find out more about ways to tackle systemic structural racism? Are there good tools / centralized resources out there? And also, just to kind of dovetail on that, what do you think, everyone, speakers, about the potential of the free Black university that's being set up? That's by an academic called Mills. Do you think the American system, that's a big topic. I should have read the whole thing before I started. But, do you think the American system of all black universities could work in the UK? So I guess to conflate those together, I don't think you can actually. But do you want to answer the first part, which is where do you send people who want to find out more about structural racism? And if you can very briefly touch on the possibility of historically black universities and colleges being part of the UK process of higher education.
Not in terms of resources, but in terms of the black universities, I was thinking about damn fucking time. But other than that, America is very different in the sense that they needed to set up those universities because of the very visceral history of slavery there. So they needed, HBCUs there. But in the same thing in the UK, we've seen time and time again, especially the way the education system is failing young black people, it would be literally a game changer for a lot of people.
Any other thoughts on any of that before
just
we
respond a little on sort of resources and where to go? I did put in a link there that a page Beat Freak set up with various resources, not specifically about institutional racism, but you might find a thing or two in there as well. But I want to speak a bit about white people or non-black people of color holding themselves accountable. We've had discussions recently within our curator program with some of our cohorts, basically about this whole idea of allyship. And I think a lot of people like to use that as sort of like a badge, in a sense that it's just a box to tick. Like, I've ticked these boxes, I'm now regarded as an ally, whereas I personally believe it's quite a continual process, as in you have to continue to be unlearning. And even then, once you've unlearned something, you have to continue putting in that energy and effort to hold yourself accountable and unlearn all these, these issues that have been, and these themes that have been hardwired into our heads over the years. In terms of resources, I know everything's on the internet, to be honest, in a sense that it is just about Googling it. We can't say that there is one sort of area where you can get everything. It's just about consistently and continually looking out for these things, watching films, supporting black businesses, looking up a book you might hear about here and there, or attending discussions like this. I think especially discussions are some of the best resources you could probably access and learn from, because you're listening to real people. That makes sense. Not to say that books or any other media are useless. It's a good way to have a first-person account of these experiences and learn from them.
It's hard to stay uninformed in this climate. Ignorance is no excuse anymore. And if you continue going, especially to black people, asking me, teach me, don't do that unless they're comfortable. It's that simple. You can find it yourself. Pretty much every person who's doing some sort of form of activism on Instagram's put together resource lists. You can find it.
Definitely. So before I hand back over to Ella, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who contributed in the Q&A, especially those who gave very kind of personal stories, and especially the ones that are particularly traumatic. It's really helpful to hear. And we want to make these as interactive and personal as possible, so everyone's contributions, whether it's writing in the group chat or just popping up and saying something, it's really appreciated, and it makes it more of a visceral and beneficial experience for everyone involved. But yeah, so we're looking to do that more often. So if anyone has any comments on that, please let us know about how we can make it more interactive. But Ella, if you want to kind of sign off.
Yeah, that's really it. For our next meeting in 2 weeks' time, we actually don't. We're hoping to do a Pride event actually, mainly focused around LGBTQ issues and institutional racism. But yeah, any suggestions for kind of future events and things like that, please do let us know. And yeah, thank you again. I've made some notes. Hopefully some other people might have made some notes as well, just about kind of taking these ideas and turning them into then hopefully future campaigns and some forms of activism that we can do, and hopefully hopefully, yeah. I mean, but even as Eugene said, like just having these discussions is so powerful. And yeah, just that's it really. Just to promote the charity fundraisers that we posted again. They're in the chat somewhere. If everyone has a second after this to donate a couple of pounds if you can. No worries if you can't. And yeah, just thank you so much to the speakers who have, as I say, like you guys have given up your like time to prepare for this and speak to us. Just, you know, out of the kindness of your hearts, and it's been like so interesting and valuable. So yeah, thanks a lot, and hopefully I'll see most of you again next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you, everyone.
Really good.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Good night,
Good night.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, Jen. Thank you.
Bye, Ella.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Han. Say hi to Dad and Mum.
I will do.
Bye, Nana.
Thanks, Ella, and everyone.
Bye, everybody else.